This is the Realty Classroom Podcast, episode number 141. What would I do if I started all over again as a new real estate agent? Are you a real estate agent with an entrepreneurial spirit who wants to turn your job into a business without sacrificing your lifestyle, but you just can't seem to find the right plan or heck any plan to help you get there? Well, then, hey, you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Realty Classroom and the host of this podcast. Now, to help you take immediate action to get started in a more strategic direction. Yes, strategic plan. I know all those things we hate to hear, but it's for your own good. I wish, and we're talking about this today, I wish I started with a plan. So go over to freeagentgift.com and I'll give you one. We're giving them away left and right at my brokerage, the Griffin Realty Group, and people are really appreciating them, and I know you would too. And especially if you're a top producer, it's always important to reset yourself and ask what I asked in the last podcast. Why are you working on what you're working on? Right? Really important to ask that question regularly because you might not be building the business you think you are. All right, here we go. What would I do if I started all over again as a new real estate agent? So the very first thing that I would do is I would recognize that the business, the real estate agent business, which expands to agency, is all about listings, and I'd build a plan to get them. That would be right off the bat. I think when I think back on my career, I was coming out of another small business. I had been in corporate America and found out that it really didn't work for me. I was in the finance business, and although I loved it, I had this desire to create something for myself, particularly a business. And I ended up on beautiful Cape Cod trying to think my way through it and recognized something in real estate was pulling me. So starting off doing some development and flips, in particular on residential, I realized that I really wanted to help people go through this process. And that's how I got into the business. So as I arrive at it, here I am with all this corporate business. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've been in venture capital and we talk about business plans all the time. Let me go find a business plan. And back then, it wasn't easy to just run to the internet. This was 1999 when I first got licensed. So it's been some time since I've had a license, 21 years. And back then, you just didn't jump on your laptop and think into it, or now your phone. You had to go to Barnes & Noble and kick around and looking at the shelves. And like there is today, there were plenty of people telling you how to flip houses and make money. Back then, you could buy, there was a few folks on TV doing infomercials. Back in that day, it was Carlton Sheets. And I had Carlton Sheets' whole program and business plan in front of me. So to flip houses, there were no shortage of people ready to give you advice. But you go try to find a business plan for real estate agents and what to do, it was non-existent. I mean, literally non-existent. I couldn't find anything. And then I really struggled with trying to find a business plan. Everything seemed so formal to me. It was just this weird, long, drawn-out formula that didn't speak to me. I didn't really have these chunks where I could explain it. So I really didn't know as much as I do today. I mean, I knew it was about listings, but I really didn't know that as an agent, I should be trying to figure out how to get them. I was just of that mindset that you give me, and this is literally what I said to the guys at Realty Executives who hired me before I even had the license finished. And that wasn't that kind of place back then. So we hit it off really well early on. They knew I had this business acumen. It was just needed to go get the license. But my plan, when they asked me what it was all about really, I was sort of sarcastically saying something to the extent that I'm just going to work my tail off. It's all about work ethic. I've always had a work ethic that was strong. I'm not afraid of hard work. And so my thought was, well, since I couldn't find a business plan, you're not really giving me one, and you're asking me what my plan is. Well, we're both stuck. Everybody's kind of looking around at each other. So my thought was, you give me 2,000 business cards, a desk, a chair, and a lamp, and I'll bring the Army helmet and the work ethic. And that's literally what I said. We had a big laugh about it, and off I went. And so the plan at the time was, if you sneezed the words real estate together and I was out and about, I wasn't afraid to stick my business card in your hand and have a conversation about how I could help you. And back then, you'd have to go back and really, back then when I was an investor, everything was printed out every other week in a book. But then when I became an agent in the late 90s, things were coming online. So you could sit and you could print pictures and details out for people, but they certainly didn't have access to it. And so that was really the phenomenon. And ironically, in that genre, in that age too, Realtor.com is coming online with MLS for the first time in 1996. And so the internet is there, but certainly hasn't been adopted by the consumer, let alone the real estate agent. So I would go and I would print things out and I would just bring them to people. And then, luckily enough, I would stumble into a listing. Somebody I knew, I had a couple friends that were mortgage brokers who were looking forward to me becoming an agent, and I had almost become a mortgage broker. Quite frankly, my friend was a manager at a mortgage brokerage company. I had a stack of cards, and I just decided in the 11th hour, this isn't for me. This other side of the business is, and so I stumbled into a few things, and then I realized that a listing was like a retail storefront. I recognized, because I'd grown up in the retail business, that if you just opened up the doors, it was the equivalent of being in that retail business where people would come through and they would look at that particular property. But then you had this list of others that you could give them and say, I can show you these others too if you don't like this one. They're in the same price range. They're in the same neighborhood. So I got it. I understood it, but I was just doing business. That was the problem. So as I was doing business, it was exhausting. It was all on muscle, all on energy. And I had plenty of it. 2 little kids at home. And my wife was a physical therapist. And, we had no choice back then but to make a living. I wasn't born independently wealthy, that's for sure. And so I had to hustle. And that's where a lot of that hustle language resonates with me, but not without a plan. And I wouldn't recommend it. I don't believe that you can just go out there and hustle and muscle your way to success. It's actually a big mistake. Keep the hustle and muscle mentality, but you have to apply it to something much more strategic than what I did. It was really, really difficult. So I continued to press and press and press. And reading Realtor magazine at one point in time, I found a mentor who was doing it at the top of the game at that time for RE/MAX. And I figured there had to be some systematic approach. So right after September 11th, I jumped on a plane, went to my first real estate conference and realized, thank goodness, there is some systemization. And that's where I got introduced through that whole system to Michael Gerber's work. And I really became a fan of using Michael Gerber's work, the E-Myth, the entrepreneurial myth, as at least a foundation for a plan. And it wasn't really a plan. And I'm not going to say that Michael gives a very clear plan. In fact, when I got into his mastery work, I got a little bit more confused. But I do give full credit to that body of work for changing perspective. And the perspective was more to, okay, slow down. You can't just go out there and hustle listings and buyers without thinking through strategically, or meaning a higher level. What does this business look like? And that was the question that somewhere along the way in Gerber's work I gleaned. You must ask your question, how does the real estate agent business really work? And Michael went on to actually co-author a book with the gentleman that at the time, Rich Rector, owned Realty Executives where I was. And we struck up a friendship because very quickly I was one of like the top 7th producer out of about 13,000 people, 11,000, whatever it was at the time, doesn't matter. I had some success. And so I got a chance to meet Rich and we talked a lot about business, and he was a sharp guy that went to Stanford, and he somehow fell in love with Gerber too. I'm not so sure back then. I didn't introduce him to it. I don't know when he first came about, but because he writes the book in the thick of the recession. And so the problem with that book is it speaks to real estate agency, which skips over the agent. So I want to speak to the agent and then tell you how that relates to the agency, because it's a building block. How every agent does business is great for them. And I'm speaking to you as an individual agent. But what I'm saying is, for all of you that might be listening to this that have a sense of agency, your agents need this. If you want to have thousands of agents, for example, hundreds, even tens, you want them to have this kind of a planned approach so your agency does well. And if you're thinking about expanding your individual agent business, but you can't comprehend ever owning an agency, that's fine too. It still works the same way. And one of the biggest problems with top producers is, oh my gosh, they expand in every wrong way possible. They spend their way, into oblivion. They hire the wrong way. So you see what I'm saying? All of that, and I haven't mentioned a word about how to get listings and to build a plan off of that. Let that sink in for a second. That's about, I'm looking down at my clock, a 9-minute intro. Forget about what I say in the beginning. Let's cut it back. Let's call it 6-7 minutes. I just talked about how most agents see the world of business, or how they might start. And that's my real story. And not a word about that this is actually the listings acquisition business. See, if we just let's just say we got a whole bunch of new agents and we're introducing them to the business. I'm going to take them to the equivalent of the stock exchange. If there were such a collective, and Canada does a better job of collectively putting all the listings in one pool versus the multiple MLSs that we have in our business. But let's just suffice to say we pulled them all together and say, look, everybody, look down at the trading floor for real estate. It's called the multiple listing service. And in there, you can see all the listings. Let that sink in. Not in there you can see all the buyers. In the MLS system, you can see all the listings. So obviously to the new observer, the business is all about listings. Wonderful. Who has the listings? They're called sellers. Wonderful. Who controls the sellers? And control is a strong word, but who made the relationship with the seller to get them to list the property in the multiple listing service? That's it. That's how it works. And so I would have built a plan very quickly and very intentionally. It's not like I didn't get this to some nebulous degree or cloudy degree. I did understand it. But what I didn't do was build my own plan. Instead of looking around Barnes & Noble shelves for somebody to have written this, I could have just observed this. Once I had Gerber in mind, I did. And it really didn't until 2012, and I was already well into the business when I started the Realty Classroom, where I could think alone and use Gerber's work to start almost afresh, anew, and look at it from a listings intentional acquisition business. And very quickly, because of that, I made a lot of changes. I got away from this acquisition of the internet buyer who was really just loaded. Those leads were loaded with a bunch of whimsical inquiries because people were just curiously going, or they were curious and going to the internet to peruse properties. They weren't even real intentional buyers. So not only am I moving away from listings acquisition, I'm moving into this really tough place to find and make a living on buy side. And over time, the level of property that an internet buyer was looking at and was maybe buying quickly was certainly less than median and well below average where I was living. So you can see all these problems stem from one little thing that I would have done differently. How do I acquire listings? And I would have said what I say today to my coaching members, at or above median first. I'm not saying that I wouldn't serve. If you listen to me, even for one podcast, you'll get the idea that I do this to serve you. There's nothing that I ask in return. You'll know how to spend money with me as a coach if you want it. You'll find that. I'll make it easy and easier as time goes on. But this is for you. This is about you. I am telling you that this is exactly what I would have done. I would have been intentional about the acquisition of listings in a smaller geography, not all of Cape Cod, not all of downtown Boston. I would have looked at Back Bay, Beacon Hill for Boston, and I would have looked at the town of Barnstable and then slowly crept into some of the contiguous areas. And in both places, I would have targeted marketing to somebody that owned a property at or above at least the median price. And I could have gotten that in about 30 seconds out of the MLS system, which I was paying for. That's it. That fast, I would have done it. And I would have taken out a legal pad. I've got a stack of legal pads right behind me on a desk over here and right on the desk that you can't see here in the podcast. And I would have written my thoughts down. Then I would have observed, how do the best companies acquire listings? How is it happening? What are they saying? How are they getting these people? Do they know these people? Do they not know these people? Right? That's what I would have done. Next thing I would have done is in that planning stage, and I get it, by the way, a lot of you that come to me at the Griffin Realty Group, my brokerage, or you come to me at the Realty Classroom, doesn't matter. You come to me, I'm going to give you the same advice. I know you need to make money or want to make money right now, so I know you have to hustle. And I'm not talking you off of buyers. I'm saying, what would I have done in more of a strategic, planned way? But would I have run out to sell a buyer a house because a friend of mine wanted to buy a house and it was even below the median? Sure, of course I would have. Of course I would have. I'm not telling you don't do that. And I'm saying I would still do it today if a friend called and they wanted to buy something. I still do it with past clients, even if they don't fit what I would have marketed to today, knowing what I know. I'm a servant. It's a privilege to have this license, and I love to serve. It's a major financial and emotional transaction. I mean, I helped somebody move where her husband was essentially dying in the bed in the other room, and I just wouldn't let it go until we could solve this problem. I mean, just the beauty of what we get to be involved in. However, that is not a strategy, and it shouldn't be. for a business that needs to be profitable. You can always throw in whatever type of service. And again, I'm not knocking anybody that makes a living in the entry-level category, especially first-time home buyers, distress sales, whatever. That's your decision. I'm telling you what I would have done. Okay? This is what I would have done. So the second point is, in order to find and be disciplined about sticking with the person that would own that median or above property in the geography I wanted, I would have in my plan a very clear description of my avatar / ideal client, and I would stick to it. I can't believe how powerfully and positively this has affected my own personal book of business. As you know, I'm not just a theorist here. I actually do this business in a very systematic, very leveraged way of time. That's why I have time to coach and grow businesses, because I got smarter about being strategic. So the reason I bring that up is because my right-hand person on my own book of business, Laura, who's been with me, I'm losing count here, 13 years, we realized the minute that we break the plan and go after somebody who doesn't fit the avatar, it inevitably causes us problems. Let me talk about avatar for a second, because it's a powerful word. It might not mean as much to you yet, but it should. Avatar really means ideal client. And the fight in the mind, and I had this too, but I know differently now, is that I'll go anywhere. I'll do business with anybody. They want to buy or sell with me. And that's the pushback you get from your own mind. And I don't argue with it. I say, sure, go do what you have to do. But what I'm saying is, see out in front of you a business opportunity and the ability for you to grow the smartest one possible. That's what I want you to think about. So the smartest one possible, we've already talked about it, includes an intentional listings acquisition plan at the very core of the overall plan. But then you have to define, how do you talk to that avatar? Because that's what marketing starts with. Smart marketing, you can go around looking at all the smartest marketers and read the books. You're going to keep hearing about avatar. To whom are we speaking with our marketing? That's why you need a very clear idea of who this person is. Give them names. And again, it's made up. It's sort of a creative process. Not sort of. It is a creative process, but it really becomes reality. Because as you make it up in the beginning, well, somebody that owns a median price or above house in Beacon Hill must look and sound and work and play like this. Now, I know that might sound prejudiced or whatever it is, but it's just the reality. Who owns those houses? Go walk around these neighborhoods. Watch who walks out the door. Observe. You're just observing reality. That's what you're doing when you're creating an avatar. So it doesn't have to be some whacked out creative. This is a very physical, geographical business on the listing side. Just go see who lives there. So that's how you begin to describe who lives there. And I'd love to do business with people like that, you say to yourself. So you put it in your plan. Now, in your plan, thanks to Gerber, and again, freeagentgift.com. It's all mapped out for you there, freeagentgift.com. If you go there, there's an infographic that I give you of this planned out process through Gerber's perspective of the owner, the manager, and the technician. So a lot of what I talk about is managed intentional planning, right? So in there's a marketing module. The very first module I write to be managed is marketing. To whom am I going to send a marketing message? And I'm not talking about the medium yet. You all run to the median. You want to go buy, a website that gives away a free home evaluation, or you want to send a postcard blindly without even thinking about it. You're always rushing towards the medium versus going back to saying, who's the person I'm trying to speak to? Because that helps you with list selection right off the bat. That already tells you. And then if you can go one step up from just list selection, you can say, well, do they have context? Did somebody pass recently? Have they expired recently? Are they online trying to sell it themselves? I mean, those are three of the obvious ones amongst other smart lists. And as technology gets better and better, there are predictive lists companies now, or the list companies have evolved to that. So there are all sorts of ways to define how you could get to this person. But who is it? Because in the marketing plan, after you say who it is, you have to write a message to them. And that's really where this whole concept of offer comes in. And that's the next point here. I would write out a very clear simple plan for sellers and buyers, and I would use that as the core of my offer. See, let me explain this. What I learned was, hey, get a free list of properties with X. Hey, get a free list of distress sales. That takes you right down to the left-hand side and to the buy side of the strategy. So it was exactly what I wouldn't do today. But here I was writing an offer for something that a consumer might want. A free list of properties that sold around them on the listing side is still a good core offer. If you want to make that offer to somebody who's thinking about selling, that's exactly where they would start off, because that's exactly what you would do if you walked into their house, is take a list of what's sold and make the insightful interpretation of what that means to their asking price and their situation, right? Very logical. So it all becomes very logical when you do this correctly. Again, I wished I knew all this, and that's why I'm sharing this. So I would have a very clear plan that said, look, I'd like to get you this list of properties that sold around you, but I'd also like to share this very simple 7-step seller plan that I've written out, because with or without me, those two pieces of information, what sold around you and the 7 steps, they're the universal 7 steps of how this process works. And I'd like you to have that as a plan. Because even as a real estate agent, I wish somebody gave me a plan. So I think as a seller, you should have a simple plan so you understand how listing and selling your property really works. Don't leave it to your perception, because now you'll have all the agents come in and say, oh, my company, oh, my resume, oh, my marketing. That's not it in its entirety. Those might be components of it, but the real way that a seller sells is through a process. And here's a good plan for that process, so that you understand that marketing and resume of the agents and their negotiation skill, those are just parts of a whole. Here's the whole. Same for buyers. But I'm not going to get into heavy buyers right now, but I would have that ready for them too, because a lot of sellers would have been my buyers. And those are the buyers that I get to this very day as an agent with my own book of business, right? Where Laura and I and Autumn are working on my core book of business. We know this is our core offer, and a lot of our sellers become buyers. So we had a triple-ended deal recently where it was a sale of a luxury and a downside to 2. It's 3 sides. So these buyers are coming by default because we're intentionally acquiring, in that case, well above the median price, right? And it just much more profitable and interesting business that way. But we had plans for all sides. So we were ready. Well, look, you're going to shift gears with us and you're going to go into this buy side. And here's how it worked. Man, were we able to bring everybody's anxiety down and everything went smoothly. Now everybody's happy. All right, the last point here is, sorry, a long one here because I know it's an important subject, but my marketing plan would differentiate how to acquire sellers' listings versus how to market those listings. See, once you get into the acquisition of listings business, one of the strong perceptions of the seller is it's all about marketing. How are you going to market my property, they say. It's almost like an attack. Well, first of all, I need to market to acquire those sellers. So in my case, we love outbound calls to people that have context like expireds, probates, to begin by offering them this information in this planned package. And that's how we acquire the listing. But that has absolutely nothing to do with how I'm going to market that listing. And by the way, one of the most obvious ways to market a listing is to do all the right things digitally these days. Take the pictures, turn it into movies, maybe a 3D tour, all right? And syndicate it to your website and then everywhere else, but also most importantly, syndicate it in MLS so it goes everywhere. So one of the best parts of being an agent is the simple ability to explain to a seller, look, if we price it right and present it correctly, well, 88% of the time, I'm going to be doing a deal with another brokerage. That's just the fact of the matter. But that other 12% or more, we're going to hustle. We're going to push it around the internet. We're going to make some noise with open houses. We're going to, do what we do from a marketing standpoint. So there's a big difference between those two things. And I would have had a plan to do so. All right, let me summarize this. Now, of course, I could go on and on and on and on. And by the way, I'm in the middle of writing the book for the Realty Classroom. So a lot of these thoughts will make their way in a much more organized, full articulation of what I know today as a planned player in the business and sharing that with you. But for now, these are 4 key points that I want my clients to focus on and I want all of you to focus on. What would I do if I started all over again as a new real estate agent? 1, I would recognize that the business is all about listings, and I'd build a plan that focused on getting them. That would be the core of my plan. The second point is I would include in my plan a very clear description of my avatar/ideal client, and I would stick to it. And I mean, really stick to it. I wouldn't let people into my business that were going to cause problems because they didn't fit the avatar. 3, and when I say avatar, it's not a bias. I'm talking about motivation too. In that avatar, there's a lot going on. Maybe next time I'll talk about avatar in a deeper way, but avatar has a lot to do with a reason for selling and their motivation to do so. Not the fact that they're geographically in a spot and own a place, right? Next, 3, I would write out a very clear, simple plan for sellers and buyers and use it as my core offer. Here's the process you're going to go through, and here's how you do it with me. I'd have owned that long ago as I do today, and it's everything to me today. 4, my marketing plan would differentiate how to acquire sellers' listings, so marketing to get those listings versus how to market those listings and sell them. Those are 2 very separate things, and I would have broken them out before and made it very clear to sellers what the difference was. Let me summarize it this way. It's important for newbies or veteran agents to keep asking the question, but especially veterans. What would I do if I were new to the real estate agent business? As I think through that question, my first steps would be simple, but disciplined and very intentional. In order to succeed in the reality of the way the business really works, and that's from a consumer's perspective, how does it work for them versus what my clouded perspective might have told me, I would have to avoid being pulled off course by shiny objects that have absolutely nothing to do with listing and closing more properties, as evidenced by the internet and all the buy-side pull we all felt. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get started in the right direction or a better direction if you're already in action with a copy of our free strategic plan that's waiting for you at freeagentgift.com. Don't humor me. Help yourself, right? Free agent gift. That's exactly what it is. It's a depiction of a one-pager. I wish I had it 21 years ago, and boy, I would have saved a lot of my pain. Also, don't forget, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We'd also appreciate if we just comment on our posts so we know what you're thinking or what this provokes you to think about, and then we can help you further by responding to what you have to say. Hey, thanks for listening, but here we go. I'm going to say it again like I always do. Nobody's coming for you. Nobody. So go get to work on your own business, and I'll be here in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks again for listening.